am. So we are in 2 Samuel chapter 13. We just talked about David and Bathsheba, and I got the wrong Bible in front of me. Yeah. Well, I like to have the same one that is actually on the screen. Like so we talked through David and Bathsheba, and that's a very incriminating, story of David, and we talked about it last week where he tries to he gets mad at Nathan, and Nathan calls him out on it. And the big difference between David and the other kings are that David actually repents. However, the end of chapter 12, I'll read again to you, because you can definitely tell that this has been, like, the authors of the book here are definitely wanting you to know something about David, because this last little couple verses are grotesque, I guess you could say. So let's see. When do I need to start reading? We'll do 29 of chapter 12, verse 29 to the end. So David gathered all the people together and went to Rabbah and fought against it and took it. Then he took their king's crown from his head. Its weight was a talent of gold. So like years worth of salary type of idea. Talent of gold with precious stones all through it. So this is just a massive crown, gaudy, and it was set on David's head. And he brought out the spoil of the city in great abundance. And he brought out people who were in it and put them to work with saws and iron picks and iron axes, and made them cross over to the brickworks. So he did all the cities of the people of Ammon. Then David and all the people returned to Jerusalem. So in my mind, like, you have this David with this massive crown on, like his crowning achievement, right? And all of a sudden he's got all these people working for him that were conquered people, and they just so happen to be doing forced labor and making bricks. Like, there's some code language going on there. If you can't see through all of this, it can be a little murky. Like, it's fair. David's looking a little bit like Pharaoh right there. So this is what I talk about, that there's like, the authors, like, they're saying one thing. It seems like they're almost kind of glorifying how powerful David has become, but they're also kind of saying, like, hey, like, the whole story is against this. Because what I'm really seeing as we're writing this sermon is, especially during Saul's reign, at how much they talk about how God saved them from Egypt. That God took them out there, took them through the wilderness, took them all through those things. And then here David is at the peak of his power, and he's just using slaves, and it's almost like he's forgotten about Egypt. So like, that's fascinating. I had never really seen that before. And so that's it's good, because it's surrounding that story of David and Bathsheba, and there's no reason for us to read it, so it just kind of goes forgotten, and so I think that's where we are, and we continue to see, as we go through here, the continued fall of David. So this is kind of a long chapter, but let's read the whole chapter. Let's do chapter 13. And it isn't for the faint of heart, I can tell you that. Like, so let's see here. As always, the people watching online, let me know if there's like a bad echo or anything like that. So here we go.
After this, Absalom, the son of David, had a lovely sister, whose name was Tamar, and Amnon, the son of David, loved her. Amnon was so distressed over his sister Tamar that he became sick, for she was a virgin. and it was improper for Amnon to do anything to her. But Amnon had a friend whose name was Jonadab, the son of Shimeah, David's brother. Now Jonadab was a very crafty man, and he said to him,
"Why are you, the king's son, becoming thinner day after day? Will you not tell me?"
Amnon said to him,
I love Tamar, my brother Absalom's sister.
"Lie down on your bed and pretend to be ill, and when your father comes to see you, say to him, 'Please let my sister Tamar come and give me food, and prepare the food in my sight, that I may see it and eat it from her hand.'"
Then Amnon lay down and pretended to be ill. And when the king came to see him, Amnon said to the king,
Please, let Tamar, my sister, come and make a couple of cakes for me in my sight, that I may eat from her hand.
And David sent home to Tamar.
"Now go to your brother Amnon's house and prepare food for him."
So Tamar went to her brother Amnon's house, and he was lying down. Then she took flour and kneaded it, made cakes in his sight, and baked the cakes. And she took the pan and placed them out before him. But he refused to eat.
Have everyone go out from me.
And they all went out from him. Then Amnon said to Tamar,
Bring the food into the bedroom, that I may eat from your hand.
And Tamar took the cakes which she had made, and brought them to Amnon her brother in the bedroom. Now when she had brought them to him to eat, he took hold of her.
Come, lie with me, my sister.
My brother! Do not force me, for no such thing should be done in Israel. Do not do this disgraceful thing. And where could I take my shame? And as for you, you would be like one of the fools in Israel. Now, therefore, please speak to the king, for he will not withhold me from you.
However, he would not heed her voice, and being stronger than she, he fought and lay with her. Then Amnon hated her exceedingly, so that the hatred with which he hated her was greater than the love with which he had loved her. And Amnon said to her,
Arise, be gone.
No, indeed. This evil of sending me away is worse than the other that you did to me.
but he would not listen to her. Then he called his servant to attend him.
Here, put this woman out, away from me, and bolt the door behind her.
Now she had on a robe of many colors, for the king's virgin daughters wore such apparel. And his servant put her out and bolted the door behind her. Then Tamar put ashes on her head, and tore her robe of many colors that was on her, and laid her hand on her head, and went away crying bitterly. And Absalom her brother said to her,
"Has Amnon your brother been with you? But now hold your peace, my sister. He is your brother. Do not take this thing to heart."
So Tamar remained desolate in her brother Absalom's house. But when King David heard of all these things, he was very angry. And Absalom spoke to his brother Amnon, neither good nor bad. For Absalom hated Amnon, because he had forced his sister Tamar. And it came to pass, after 2 full years, that Absalom had sheep shearers in Baal-hazor, which is near Ephraim. So Absalom invited all the king's sons. Then Absalom came to the king.
Kindly note, your servant has sheep shearers. Please, let the king and his servants go with your servant.
No, my son, let us not all go now, lest we be a burden to you.
Then he urged him, but he would not go, and he blessed him. Then Absalom said,
If not, please let my brother Amnon go with us.
Why should he go with you?
But Absalom urged him. So he let Amnon and all the king's sons go with him. Now Absalom had commanded his servants,
Watch now, when Amnon's heart is merry with wine, and when I say to you, strike Amnon, then kill him. Do not be afraid. Have I not commanded you? Be courageous and valiant.
So the servants of Absalom did to Amnon as Absalom had commanded. Then all the king's sons arose, and each one got on his mule and fled. And it came to pass, while they were on their way, that news came to David.
Absalom has killed all the king's sons, and not one of them is left.
So the king arose and tore his garments and lay on the ground, and all his servants stood by with their clothes torn. Then Jonadab, the son of Shimeah, David's brother, answered,
Let not my lord suppose they have killed all the young men, the king's sons, for only Amnon is dead. For by the command of Absalom this has been determined from the day that he forced his sister Tamar. Now therefore, let not my lord the king take this thing to his heart, to think that all the king's sons are dead, for only Amnon is dead.
Then Absalom fled. And the young man who was keeping watch lifted his eyes and looked, and there many people were coming from the road on the hillside behind him. And Jonadab said to the king,
Look, the king's sons are coming. As your servant said, so it is.
So it was, as soon as he had finished speaking, that the king's sons indeed came, and they lifted up their voice and wept. Also the king and all his servants wept very bitterly. But Absalom fled and went to Talmai, the son of Ammihud, king of Geshur. And David mourned for his son every day. So Absalom fled and went to Geshur, and was there 3 years. And King David longed to go to Absalom, for he had been comforted concerning Amnon, because he was dead.
Okay. This is cheery readings today, all around.
I think so.
Today, all around. And I think the grotesqueness of that image of David with the crown and building bricks and all that stuff, that grotesqueness continues into this chapter, and kind of changes it there. So like I think we're starting to see that. So there's a lot going on here. There's some things. So what stood out to you here? What things stood out to you and you thought was interesting?
That Ammon, just like David, connived to get what he wanted.
Yeah. So
Turned out to be the most. David did nothing when the daughter got raped.
yeah.
It's unbelievable.
Well, and also
She was his child. She was a child of David also.
yeah.
And for him to, and I think that's why Absalom waited so long for the revenge. He was waiting for David to do something, and David did nothing.
Yeah. Yeah.
That really impressed me. Good.
It's also very similar to what David did.
And very similar to what he did. Yeah, it's true.
Very, very similar to what he did, and his reaction to it is very low.
Moral authority was undercut by.
Well, and I think that's I think you're seeing that. Yeah, I think you're seeing that. Like this, like we're seeing the downfall of David now, and they're building the case for it. And so that's what I think is so striking about that image of him wearing that crown with all those jewels, is it looks like that's the pinnacle, but we can see there's like a grotesqueness to it, and that's just continual. Like that's, yeah. So like, that's good. That's good. What else kind of stood out to you?
Timur's clothing.
Do what? What did you say, Lee?
Timur's clothing, a coat of many colors.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
I thought that was interesting too. Yeah, with Joseph and it's interesting that it's the same verbiage, and it's in the other translations besides New King James, it kind of uses that same verbiage, right? Like the coat of many colors, like there's definitely a callback. Now it says like that virgins would dress like this, but that's the exact same wording as Joseph and his technicolor dream coat, right? Like his coat of many colors. Yeah. And so like that's very interesting. So it's obviously calling you in to see some parallels in, because you have all these brothers that are fighting and all that stuff. So yeah. So that's the coat of many colors. Now, Cheryl, you were going to say something.
I was going to say when Amnon sees his sister, even though he professed love
Yeah.
to have her,
Yeah.
he did a 180. He wanted her out of there as soon afterwards. That was his conquering.
Yeah.
That wasn't love.
Yeah. Yeah. It was, that lust, conquering, like that's, the coveting type of idea. And you kind of, again, with this kind of grotesqueness vision of what's happening to this family, like that's
thinking that ugly family.
Yeah, and it's David's family. like that's definitely. I mean, so think about the patterns that we're seeing. Like the Samuel began with Eli. Eli had rotten sons. Samuel had some rotten sons. Saul. I mean, his sons. I mean, they all got killed. Like over there, but Saul and David, it's kind of the same story, where all these things, and it also, like, Absalom becomes like the big thorn in David's side coming up here, and you can kind of, this story also drives you into, you can be, Absalom, you could see why Absalom becomes so angry, at this. Because I think what kind of Glory was talking about, David's really not doing much, and Absalom's like, well, someone's gotta take this.
Feel like he should be the heir anyway because he was the older.
Yeah.
And then the other boys.
Yeah, than any of the other ones, and he's also, Absalom seems to be a pretty good man of war as well, and that really seems to be how they are defining what a good king is. That it's not so much the shepherd, like what David started and what Saul could have been. It's this war, and we see this warfare that actually ends up ending David. That's what we see in Bathsheba, is that if he wasn't involved in those wars, that whole thing with Bathsheba probably wouldn't have happened. And so, like, that's, we don't like to talk about that because we are like Rome in our country today, and we kind of like war over there. And so, like, that's, and this stories here are it's not glorifying it. It's kind of saying it's the problem.
Reminds me way back when I decided I need to start reading the Bible.
Yeah.
I just couldn't keep at it because it's ugly.
Oh yeah. Yeah.
There's just so much of this stuff.
Yeah, there is, and it shows you ugly.
The Old Testament.
Yeah, Old Testament in particular, but in this you can see the story that they're trying to tell though. Like in this, they're like, this is ugly. This is ugly. Like that's and this family is doing ugly things. Was there anything? It was. Well, I think we're seeing the fall of David right now. We're seeing the fall, and so what?
Why did they tell David that all his sons had been killed? And then Jonadab, who told Amnon to go to sleep with it, basically set up the preceding scene for Amnon to go sleep with his sister. He turns around and straightens David out and says, "No, your sons aren't all killed." Yeah. That seems like so.
Where was that? Where was that again?
Yeah, I think it's because it says they all fled.
But in verse 5, he talks to the son, but in verse 32, he says, "Let not my lord suppose that all your sons are dead."
32.
Yeah.
Killed.
Yeah. Someone told him all his sons are killed. I don't know why that.
That's a verse 30.
Yeah.
That one. News came to David. So the news came to David in verse 30 that Absalom had killed all the king's sons. So the king arose, grieved by tearing his garments, and laid on the ground, and all of the servants stood around with their clothes torn. And then Jonadab, the son of Shema, David's brother, answered him, "Let not the Lord suppose that they've killed all the young man's the king's sons."
Because they fled, because all the sons fled.
Right.
That there was a rumor going around that they were all gone, so it was assumed that they were killed.
And so it says that at the end of that, right at the end of verse 33, that for only Ammon is dead.
One, he's the culprit, where he's helping the son do bad things, and then now he's helping David understand you didn't lose all your sons. So it's like,
yeah, well, we all vacillated.
Well, and Ammon, yeah, like it's, well, and that's like, and this is an important lesson for us too. I was taught that everything that the Bible was doing and all the characters are like, you can pull concrete lessons out of it, and they either have like the villain or the good guy, right? And that's like, this book is about humanity and God working through humanity. And in humanity, where I have not been my best self at times. Other you haven't either, but we've also been good at sometimes too. And so like you see the nitty gritty, like this whole story, how grotesque it is what happens to Tamar. You understand fully why Absalom becomes the villain. It's not just because he's a bad dude, is that he's seen horrible injustice and that nothing happened to it, and he feels like he needs to get even. So did anyone else notice anything else here?
I was wondering in verse 37 where it says David mourned for his son every day, if he was mourning for Absalom or if he was mourning for Amnon.
Let's see if we can look at it. And it says to the king, "Look, the king's sons are coming. They're so
Yeah, if you read.
Absalom?
So the king longed to go to Absalom."
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, it's Absalom.
It says
Yeah.
it's uncool which son David.
Yeah. So, and it could be a little bit of both, where like King 39 mentions both. So he longed to go to Absalom, but but he was receiving comfort because of Ammon, because he was dead. So like he's got two different types of son problems.
Yeah.
And that he's kind of dealing with.
The Jewish Bible says 39, and King David was pining away for Absalom, for the king had gotten over Amnon's death.
Oh.
Wow. That's interesting.
They were both of those two were his oldest living sons. My footnote is
Yeah. So one thing that stuck out to me is the end of verse 28. I'll just read 28. Tell me if anything sounds familiar. Now Absalom had commanded his servant, saying, "Watch now when Amnon's heart is merry with wine, and when I say to you, strike Ammon, then kill him. Do not be afraid. Have I not commanded you, be courageous and valiant?" Does that sound familiar? That sounds like something's getting quoted.
Uriah, especially because
trying to get Uriah.
Was that said there too? That also sounds like Joshua 1:9. Like, have I not commanded you to be strong and courageous? Is it worded any differently in the other translations? Like that's
No, it's just pretty much the same. When Edmund is merry with wine and I pour it down and kill him, don't be afraid, for it is I to give you the order. I've asked with determination like brave men.
Okay, maybe it's a different wording. It could be just how the King James rendered it. So, because I didn't see any notes about that, but I was just like, that's how the King James renders it is very similar to Joshua.
Yeah, it doesn't very much. Wine too also goes back to other killing.
Yeah, yeah, and so yeah, exactly. So what we're seeing here with this chapter is like this grotesque image that it's almost like a mirror image. It's almost like a mirror is being held up to David again, like with his own family now about what he did. Yeah, or maybe this is one of the phrases, where the apple doesn't fall too far from the tree, type of thing. So like it's a rough image, but it definitely drives us to a place where we can see how Absalom would be so upset. Like it definitely takes us there, and I think it's also just telling us like David's kind of falling.
I have a comment.
Yeah, go ahead, Mitch.
What I see from this too is that a lesson in that it doesn't matter how much power you have or how much wealth you have, you still have human desires to not pay attention to the laws and the rules.
Yeah.
They still do bad things.
Oh yeah. Like that's and I think that's important to see here, is that David is so powerful here, and yet he's got nothing but problems, and you could see. I think the story is intentionally making you see that it even looks like David's own issue. So his problems look like his own issue, like that. It's like when I eat too many donuts and then gain a little weight, like that's like the issue and the problems, to make light of this. But
I love donuts.
Yeah. So yeah, was there any other comments? Yeah.
Footnote in my Bible on 28, one of the things it mentions is with the murder of Amnon, Absalom not only avenged the rape of his sister, but also secured for himself the position of successor to the throne.
Two things at once. Two things at once. He gets to be successor to the throne, and he avenges his sister.
Amen.
Yeah. So like all of a sudden we get into the same realm as every King movie you've ever seen. Like that's yeah. So like that's so good deal. All right, so we kind of got there. So let's continue reading chapter 4. Oh, did you have someone have another comment?
Yeah.
Okay. All right, so let's do chapter 14. And hit share screen. Here we go. Oh, maybe.
So Joab, the son of Zeruiah, perceived that the king's heart was concerned about Absalom. And Joab sent to Tekoa and brought from there a wise woman.
Please, pretend to be a mourner and put on mourning apparel. Do not anoint yourself with oil, but act like a woman who has been mourning a long time for the dead. Go to the king and speak to him in this manner."
So Joab put the words in her mouth, and when the woman of Tekoa spoke to the king, she fell on her face to the ground and prostrated herself.
"Help, O king!
What troubles you?"
Indeed, I am a widow. My husband is dead. Now your maidservant had 2 sons, and the 2 fought with each other in the field, and there was no one to part them, but the one struck the other and killed him. And now the whole family has risen up against your maidservant, and they said, 'Deliver him who struck his brother, that we may execute him for the life of his brother whom he killed, and we will destroy the heir also.' So they would extinguish my ember that is left, and leave to my husband neither name nor remnant on the earth."
"Go to your house, and I will give orders concerning you."
"My lord, O king, let the iniquity be on me and on my father's house, and the king and his throne be guiltless."
"Whoever says anything to you, bring him to me, and he shall not touch you any more."
Please let the king remember the Lord your God, and do not permit the avenger of blood to destroy any more, lest they destroy my son."
"As the Lord lives, not one hair of your son shall fall to the ground."
Please, let your maidservant speak another word to my lord the king.
"Say on."
Why then have you schemed such a thing against the people of God? For the king speaks this thing as one who is guilty, in that the king does not bring his banished one home again. For we will surely die and become like water spilled on the ground, which cannot be gathered up again. Yet God does not take away a life, but he devises means so that his banished ones are not expelled from him. Now, therefore, I have come to speak of this thing to my lord the king, because the people have made me afraid. And your maidservant said, 'I will now speak to the king. It may be that the king will perform the request of his maidservant. For the king will hear and deliver his maidservant from the hand of the man who would destroy me and my son together from the inheritance of God.' Your maidservant said, 'The word of my lord the king will now be comforting. For as the angel of God, so is my lord the king in discerning good and evil. And may the Lord your God be with you.'"
"Please do not hide from me anything that I ask you."
Please, let my lord the king speak.
"Is the hand of Joab with you in all this?"
As you live, my lord the king, no one can turn to the right hand or to the left from anything that my lord the king has spoken. For your servant Joab commanded me, and he put all these words in the mouth of your maidservant. To bring about this change of affairs, your servant Joab has done this thing. But my lord is wise, according to the wisdom of the angel of God, to know everything that is in the earth.
And the king said to Joab,
"All right. I have granted this thing. Go, therefore. Bring back the young man Absalom."
Then Joab fell to the ground on his face and bowed himself and thanked the king.
"Today, your servant knows that I have found favor in your sight, my lord, O king, and that the king has fulfilled the request of his servant."
So Joab arose and went to Geshur and brought Absalom to Jerusalem. And the king said,
"Let him return to his own house, but do not let him see my face."
So Absalom returned to his own house, but did not see the king's face. Now in all Israel there was no one who was praised as much as Absalom for his good looks. From the sole of his foot to the crown of his head there was no blemish in him. And when he cut the hair of his head, at the end of every year he cut it, because it was heavy on him. When he cut it, he weighed the hair of his head at 200 shekels, according to the king's standard. To Absalom were born 3 sons and 1 daughter, whose name was Tamar. She was a woman of beautiful appearance. And Absalom dwelt 2 full years in Jerusalem, but did not see the king's face. Therefore Absalom sent for Joab, to send him to the king, but he would not come to him. And when he sent again the second time, he would not come. So he said to his servants,
See, Joab's field is near mine, and he has barley there. Go and set it on fire.
And Absalom's servants set the field on fire. Then Joab arose and came to Absalom's house.
Why have your servants set my field on fire?
Look, I sent to you, saying, Come here, so that I may send you to the king, to say, Why have I come from Geshur? It would be better for me to be there still. Now, therefore, let me see the king's face. But if there is iniquity in me, let him execute me.
So Joab went to the king and told him. And when he had called for Absalom, he came to the king and bowed himself on his face to the ground before the king. Then the king kissed Absalom.
Oh man, oh man. So like we're building here. We're building. Okay. So what stood out? There's a lot of confusing things in this one. This one's kind of hard to follow. So I'm not sure I'm going to have much wisdom and what to say around here. So what stood out? What's going on? Was everyone able to follow what was happening? Maybe we should try to get the big idea first. So Joab, so you had Joab and Absalom are still brothers, right? And Joab gets this woman to basically lie to David, which kind of sounds like a similar story to what Nathan did. Yeah. So like a similar story to what Nathan said to David about there was a man who had sheep and then someone powerful came and killed all of them. And so this woman says basically the same thing, except it's about his brothers, right? And comes and tells all these stories, which you're reading it like I was tense kind of reading. I'm like, this woman's gonna die. That's this isn't gonna end well for this woman, but I guess she's all right. And Joab kind of hires her to say this whole story as kind of a way to show David he's wrong and should show his grace towards Absalom. And it ends up kind of working because he invites Absalom back into Jerusalem, but he's given him a big dose of the cold shoulder as he's going there.
That's his. I think that's his own form of imprisonment.
Like his own. Who's David's own?
Ignore him and let him stay there.
Yeah. And I get it. I mean, there's people that I don't want to deal with sometimes, and I just won't look at them like that. I get it. I think we've all kind of done that. And so that just kind of happens. And so so he's showing some kindness about being around, but it's kind of that old phrase, you're dead to me type of thing, and doesn't want to confront him. And because probably David's got a lot of conflicting emotions too, about how everything has gone on and how he's killed Ammon. That was a good catch that Ammon was the oldest and was the heir. and Absalom is now. That's a good catch from there before. So I think that's kind of the whole story, and so they eventually kind of get to be there. So was there anything that kind of stood out to you that we need to talk about in this chapter?
The haircut.
The haircut?
Yeah.
So what do you think about the haircut?
Well, my first thought was, yeah, great. Now I can't think of the guy.
Like Samson? We're all right there, Lee. It's all right.
I'll just leave now.
Yeah, I'll just leave that. So yeah, Samson. Like it sounds like Samson. Yeah, it sounds like Samson. You know that because he was a Nazarite and as the story goes in Judges, that he got his power from his hair, and you know that's such an odd story. Such an odd story about Samson.
And he got a haircut. Did he sell the hair, or did he give it as a gift?
I think so. And
Locks for love.
Logs for love. Yeah. They it's so what I think's going on too is how is it describing Absalom in that phrase when it's talking about him cutting his hair? Like he's incredibly handsome.
Yeah.
Right. Like it's no one can hold a candle to Absalom. Right. Like that's and even his offspring are really good looking too. Like that's.
And he named his daughter Tamar.
Yeah, he named his daughter. Like that's like you. There's a lot going on in this story. You know, like it all makes sense. So he's got incredibly good looks. You know, he was praised so much for having it, and I think it kind of goes. I mean, we still kind of have, like what was that the romance novel guy Fabio from the 90s there. You know, and all the things like, you know, there's still something glamorous about like a guy with like long locks and all those things. And so like, yeah, so it's so like he has that, and I think it's kind of a sense to that. I don't know if it's so much. That could have been some of it of the power with Samson that's being communicated. Like that's, but I don't know. But the fact that he could grow it out that long, that quickly, you know, that he'd cut it. So, I mean, that'd be a lot. You could probably hear it growing. Like that's, yeah, like that's be able to grow a ton of hair like that in a year. That's impressive. Like that's, you can hear it grow, but
was that good?
Yeah. So, oh yeah. It's I'm not talking, Scott. I'm not talking like that. That's the
we weren't looking at you.
Yeah. But so he's got all the hair. You could grow it. And does anyone know how Absalom dies? We're not there yet. Does it
caught in the tree?
His hair gets caught in the tree.
Right.
So you could tell we're setting this up for Absalom's downfall. You know, they're talking about how handsome he is, talking about his hair and how amazing it is, and
Underestimated him.
Yeah, like that's. Yeah, I think we're beginning to see that he's a little into himself, and that kind of a signal of his beauty, a signal of his power. You know, I think that's where Samson kind of comes in with all that. Ends up being his downfall.
Why does David get so frightened that when no one runs away? I mean, that's a little bit ahead yet.
Yeah.
I can understand that part.
Yeah.
Why he was so.
Why he's so afraid of him?
Afraid of him, whether, you know, because when Absalom beat himself king.
And David looking in the mirror. He didn't want to sin because it would just make him think of what he had done.
Good thing.
That's that's just a gut feeling.
Yeah.
And like after that, he
grieved for him so badly.
Yeah, but he was a terrible failure.
Yeah, so I think I think it's just a rotten situation, and you're just continuing to see this, like, families just fall, just as it goes down. Did anyone else have anything? I'd like to do one more chapter, because next week we're not going to meet, and so like that would.
Oh, I know.
So that's.
How's Kim?
I'll tell you later. But I like that. Yeah, but let's if anyone doesn't want to, I had things that so there was, like we talked about everything. So let's do 15. Let's do 15, and that'll get us through this. It should be a fun one. My heading on my Bible says Absalom's treason. All right. Yeah. So here we go. Chapter 15.
After this, it happened that Absalom provided himself with chariots and horses, and 50 men to run before him. Now Absalom would rise early and stand beside the way to the gate. So it was, whenever anyone who had a lawsuit came to the king for a decision, that Absalom would call to him and say,
"What city are you from?"
And he would say,
"Your servant is from such and such a tribe of Israel."
Then Absalom would say to him,
"Look, your case is good and right, but there is no deputy of the king to hear you. Oh, that I were made judge in the land, and everyone who has any suit or cause would come to me. Then I would give him justice."
And so it was, whenever anyone came near to bow down to him, that he would put out his hand and take him and kiss him. In this manner Absalom acted toward all Israel who came to the king for judgment. So Absalom stole the hearts of the men of Israel. Now it came to pass, after 40 years, that Absalom said to the king,
"Please, let me go to Hebron and pay the vow which I made to the Lord. For your servant took a vow while I dwelt at Gesher in Syria, saying, 'If the Lord indeed brings me back to Jerusalem, then I will serve the Lord.'"
And the king said to him,
"Go in peace."
So he arose and went to Hebron. Then Absalom sent spies throughout all the tribes of Israel.
"As soon as you hear the sound of the trumpet, then you shall say, 'Absalom reigns in Hebron.'"
And with Absalom went 200 men invited from Jerusalem, and they went along innocently and did not know anything. Then Absalom sent for Ahithophel the Gilonite, David's counselor from his city, from Gilo, while he offered sacrifices. And the conspiracy grew strong, for the people with Absalom continually increased in number. Now a messenger came to David.
"The hearts of the men of Israel are with Absalom."
So David said to all his servants who were with him at Jerusalem,
"Arise, and let us flee, or we shall not escape from Absalom. Make haste to depart, lest he overtake us suddenly and bring disaster upon us, and strike the city with the edge of the sword." "We are your servants, ready to do whatever my lord the king commands."
Then the king went out with all his household after him. But the king left 10 women, concubines, to keep the house. And the king went out with all the people after him, and stopped at the outskirts. Then all his servants passed before him. And all the Kerethites, all the Pelethites, and all the Gittites, 600 men who had followed him from Gath, passed before the king. Then the king said to Ittai the Gittite,
"Why are you also going with us? Return and remain with the king. For you are a foreigner and also an exile from your own place. In fact, you came only yesterday. Should I make you wander up and down with us today, since I go I know not where? Return and take your brethren back. Mercy and truth be with you.
As the Lord lives, and as my lord the king lives, surely in whatever place my lord the king shall be, whether in death or life, even there also your servant will be.
Go and cross over.
Then Ittai the Gittite and all his men and all the little ones who were with him crossed over. And all the country wept with a loud voice, and all the people crossed over. The king himself also crossed over the brook Kidron. And all the people crossed over toward the way of the wilderness. There was Zadok also, and all the Levites with him, bearing the ark of the covenant of God. And they set down the ark of God, and Abiathar went up, until all the people had finished crossing over from the city. Then the king said to Zadok,
Carry the ark of God back into the city. If I find favor in the eyes of the Lord, he will bring me back and show me both it and his dwelling place. But if he says thus, I have no delight in you, here I am. Let him do to me as seems good to him. Are you not a seer? Return to the city in peace, and your 2 sons with you, Ahimaaz your son, and Jonathan the son of Abiathar. See, I will wait in the plains of the wilderness until word comes from you to inform me.
Therefore Zadok and Abiathar carried the ark of God back to Jerusalem, and they remained there. So David went up by the ascent of the Mount of Olives, and wept as he went up. And he had his head covered, and went barefoot. And all the people who were with him covered their heads, and went up, weeping as they went up. Then someone told David,
Ahithophel is among the conspirators with Absalom. O Lord, I pray, turn the counsel of Ahithophel into foolishness.
Now it happened, when David had come to the top of the mountain where he worshipped God, there was Hushai the Archite coming to meet him, with his robe torn and dust on his head. David said to him,
If you go on with me, then you will become a burden to me. But if you return to the city and say to Absalom, I will be your servant, O king, as I was your father's servant previously, so I will now be your servant. Then you may defeat the counsel of Ahithophel for me. And do you not have Zadok and Abiathar the priests with you there? Therefore, it will be that whatever you hear from the king's house, you shall tell to Zadok and Abiathar the priests. Indeed, they have there with them their 2 sons, Ahimaaz, Zadok's son, and Jonathan, Abiathar's son, and by them you shall send me everything you hear.
So Hushai, David's friend, went into the city, and Absalom came into Jerusalem.
Hey.
When
All right. Like you can tell, we're like just setting stuff up, like right here. Okay, so David leaves Jerusalem because Absalom is like interfering with kingly duties, and basically everyone's like, oh, this guy's giving me what I want, and it's kind of taking everything. I think that's also connected to Absalom being handsome and all of that. That's like that was one of the things that got said about him. Like he was praised by from the sole of his foot to the top of the crown. There was no blemish on him, type of thing. So like, he's beautiful. He's giving people what they want, and he's just everyone has gone away from David. Like he's basically just like taking over the throne, and basically assembles a coup. Like that's assembles a coup to take over Jerusalem there. I thought, let's see, what verse is this? The end of verse 12, it says, and the conspiracy grew strong, for the people with Absalom continued to increase in number. Yeah. Let's see here. And it says again in verse 13, the messenger came to David, the hearts of the men of Israel are with Absalom. You know, like, so this is a successful coup. And so they basically kind of leave. I thought there were two interesting sets of numbers here, verse 16 and verse 18. 16, they leave 10 women concubines to keep the house.
Yeah.
Like, that's whenever you see these important numbers, like I just want to point them out. I don't know what it means, but it's interesting that they leave 10. 10 kind of has this like exclamation point kind of greatness idea to it. And then also in the end of 18, there were 600 men who followed him to Gath and passed before the king. That, like, the fact that it's 600 is an interesting number. You know, it's not 700. It's one of the incomplete numbers. One of the numbers we don't view with a positive light. It doesn't really seem to do much with that information. I just want to point it out. And then let's see here. Oh, it was interesting. So David crosses over this little body of water, it seems. And then it talks about going into the wilderness.
Right.
Does your Bible say wilderness?
Yeah, twice.
Twice? Like that's...
You can place that it's got wilderness.
Yeah. And so crossing over water and wilderness is definitely like they crossed over the Jordan into the land flowing with milk and honey. You know, like they cross kind of over or through the Red Sea to get to the wilderness. And it seems like that kind of idea is happening again. You also see kind of David kind of change his outlook a little bit, it seems. So he grabs the ark from the city. He's got the ark with him, and and he basically kind of says that, you know, if God will lead us, you know, I'm trying to find the actual verse there.
25 and 25.
25 and 26, yeah. So verse 25, then the king said to Zadok, carry the ark of God back to the city, and I'll find and if I find favor in the eyes of the Lord, he will bring me back and show me both it and his dwelling place. But if he says thus, I have no delight in you, here I am, let him do to me as it seems good. So there all of a sudden you see kind of the old David a little bit.
And regret.
And like that's where he's just like, the ark is no longer his lucky magic piece, you know, which the ark is never meant to be that, but that's just kind of how they keep bringing it out in battle and like over there. It's never meant to be the lucky magic piece. And David stops using it. He's like, it belongs in the city of God. It belongs in Jerusalem. And he goes, and if I make it back there, then that's where I was supposed to be. If not, then okay. Like there's definitely kind of a giving it away from David there. It's kind of an old way of David type of thing. And, you know, as we're seeing through all these stories of Saul that we're kind of going back through before this, Saul was never willing to do this that David is doing right now. So I thought that was interesting. And
the Mount of Olives.
The Mount of Olives.
Mm-hmm.
Here, that's it.
He went up and his head was covered and went barefoot. So, like, that's an interesting. I'm trying to make connections. Like, with Jesus, like, the Transfiguration happened on the Mount of Olives, didn't it? Is that where that happened?
I believe.
Transfiguration of Jesus? Come on, you guys. You're supposed to know all this stuff. Yeah. Let's see here. Friends. Let me see if we can figure that out. Generation Jesus. Let's see. Where did that happen? Let's see. I don't know if significance. I'm looking. Why don't I just look at the specific words? Mount poems. Oh well, yes. No, it didn't happen there. I don't think. So the Mount of Olives, though, is an important place. You can see the Temple Mount from it. So you can see, so because Jerusalem is built on a hill and the temple is built on the top of that hill, that's what's called the Temple Mount. You have a clear eye shot of the Temple Mount from the Mount of Olives. So like all of its importance is that you can see like the temple and all of that stuff from that place. So if we then here in the story, if we go to the Mount of Olives, like he looks and he can see the temple or the Temple Mount where he can see Jerusalem. He can see because the temple is not there yet. Okay.
The Dover warning with tearing the garments and the dirt and barefoot. That's normal mourning action.
Yeah. It was not Mount of Olives, it was Mount Tabor. Like that's we had conclusive evidence twice.
Talking about like
Yeah. So it's so he's like rending his clothing, he's barefoot, which sounds awful lot like Moses with the burning bush, and that's and so like he's definitely sad about all of this. I mean, and at the end of verse 31, David says, "O Lord, I pray to turn the counsel of Ahithophel into foolishness," and that foolishness, as I kind of read it here, what do the other translations do with the end of verse 31? Frustrate.
Yeah.
That sounds like how God keeps winning the battles. Like, so it keeps it, like, especially during Saul's reign, it seems like God keeps like causing all these battles to win, like Jericho, like where Jericho, like everyone, the Lord's people didn't defeat Jericho. God defeated Jericho by marching around it 7 times, throws everyone into confusion or frustration or foolishness, I could say. And I wonder if that prayer is kind of what's going on there, is that, causes foolishness to happen, which would, if that is the case, then that's again, more signs of faith of David kind of coming in here. And then at the very end of this, verse 37, and Absalom came into the city of Jerusalem. And so that's, again, this is like every king movie you've ever watched, where like someone has a fall from grace and someone else has overtaken them and all that. So are there any other things that we need to talk about from this? All right. Well, we will end our study there then. We'll end it there, and we'll pick up at 16 in a few weeks. So to all the people watching the pre-recorded stuff, thanks for watching.